Welcome back, everybody. We are diving in now with Larry.
What's going on?
Here in St. Louis, the Dad Edge. Man, I'm excited about it. I know you guys have been killing it with your podcast as well as your mentor group and mastermind group for other entrepreneurs. Why don't you explain a little bit of all that to us, and then we can roll in.
So just like how it got started?
Sure.
Yeah. So I woke up one day and I just realized that I suddenly knew everything about being a better father and husband, and I just had to share it with the world. And
perfect.
Right. Yeah. If you believe that one, I'll tell you another one.
Oh, that's great. Once you have it all figured out, it's easy to make profit from it.
Right. Exactly. I'm like, I know all these answers, man. I knew nothing. In fact, I got to tell you, Dad Edge actually started back in 2012 with a really, really dark moment. And I'm happy. If I'm being real honest, it actually really started with my childhood. I mean, I've got a crazy story, and I'll go into that, but I'll start with how Dad Edge got started. So at the time, I had 2 boys. I was married for 9 years. I like to say I wasted the first 9 years of my marriage because I had no clue what the hell I was doing. I didn't know how to communicate with my wife. We fought a lot. We weren't intimate very often. Like, it was okay. It was one of those things where on a scale of 1 to 10, it was probably a 4. But to be honest, like, that's kind of how I grew up. And I was just like, oh, well, this is just marriage, just normal, right? You just get married. You really don't get along. You just kind of drift. You turn into roommates just with marriage, especially after kids. Like, who has sex after kids?
No, it's crazy that we normalize that, right?
Exactly. We'll get into that as well. But I had a 6-year-old son at the time who's now 15. I had a 4-year-old who's now 13, who's now just as strong as me, if not maybe even stronger. He's absolutely terrifying now. But he stepped out of line as 4-year-olds normally do. And I because of the way I grew up, I swore to myself, I was like, I'm not going to ever hit my kids. I'm not going to verbally abuse my kids. I'm not going to throw beer bottles at my kids. I'm going to be a good dad. I'm going to be a good dad. And I know all these things that I'm not going to do. And I spanked him. I mean, whether you agree with spanking or not, it wasn't something I really wanted to do, but I spanked him so hard he actually hit the ground. And in that moment, I was like, holy shit, what did I just do? And it was a reaction. And when I went to help him up, because I was just like, oh my God, I can't believe I just hit my 4-year-old. I went to help him up, and he looked at me like he was freaking terrified of me. And I saw this look in his eye, and I'm happy to go into how I grew up, but I didn't see him. I actually saw me. Ugh. And dude, it crushed me. It absolutely crushed me. And my wife, who I've known her for 25 years, we've now been married for 18 years. She's very low drama. She's very patient, very tolerant, never emasculates me, only respects me, only supports me. She's one of those rare breed women, like just amazing women. And she never, ever really gives me any kind of criticism unless she really, really means it. Like when she pipes up and says something that it's important.
Yeah.
And she looked at me and she's like, wow, really? Really? He's 4. And I'm like, and my wife never says that, says, especially in front of the kids. And she's like, he's 4. Like, you didn't have to do that. And I was like, oh shit. So I went into my office that night, and dude, I just freaking broke. And I did what every adult does when you're stressed out. I just got on Facebook. It's like, I don't want to think about my life. I'll go look at everybody else's life. Right. So in the left-hand corner, I see this button, and it says create a page. And at that point in time, I had no idea what a page was, but I'm like, I just clicked it, and it said, what do you want to name your page? And I don't know what it was, man. I'm a spiritual person. Call it divine intervention, call it karma. I don't know. But literally the Good Dad Project just rolled off my mind, off my heart, onto that keyboard. And that was a surrender of like, I was the Good Dad Project, because I was like, I have no idea what the hell I'm doing. Like, you and I were having conversations around what you used to do with shot put and discus and competing at a very, very high level. And anything that I was ever good at, which growing up, if I'm being really honest with you, wasn't a lot. But there was one thing I was really good at, 2 things in my life. I was good at martial arts, and I was good at my job in sales. And if I really looked at those things, I was like, why am I good at those things? Well, it's because I invest a lot of time and training into those things. I'm always wanting to learn. I'm always curious. Like, what's the next thing? How can I learn? How can I be better? How can I be better? And then I never done that with being a father, because in my mind, I was like, wait, this should come naturally. This should, I shouldn't have any issues with this. Like, I should know what to do. It's like in my DNA, and that's a lie we tell ourselves. And I just, in that moment, I was just like, you know what? I'm going to go out and I'm going to learn something new every day as it pertains to being a better husband, better father, just better person, because I don't know what the hell I'm doing. And I'm just going to post it here. And to be honest, I never did it for a following ever. Like, in fact, I was sort of embarrassed by people following me. So I'm like, oh, I just learned a skill on patience. Look at that. I'll just post it, right? Well, suddenly the page started getting some momentum. And then I had churches of all places, which I wasn't a very spiritual person back then, like mom groups and men's group reach out to me like, hey, will you come speak? And I'm like,
really?
Yeah. And I was like, speak. Like, the very first event I ever did was a woman reached out to me. She's like, hey, a bunch of us at this church have been following your page, a bunch of us women, and we want you to come speak. And I'm like, speak on what? And she's like, on being a father. And I'm like, yeah,
you're missing the point of this. I'm doing things to be better at a father. Yeah. Everything you've read isn't a thing I'm good at. It's a thing I'd like to do better.
Exactly. And I was really transparent on the page about that. And I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. She's like, no. That's what we really like. That's what we love about it, actually. And I was like, really? I was like, well, what do you want me to speak about? And she's like, just a day in the life of the dad. Maybe just 3 or 4, 5 things that you've learned about being a husband and father. And I'm like, all right, well, how many people am I speaking to? I was thinking like 30. She's like, oh, we have a group of 300. And I was like, 300? So anyway, I did this event, spoke, and it was received so well. And I just did it very authentically, very raw, very imperfectly. And I had so many of these women come up to me, like, oh my God, like, this is the voice these are the things that guys don't say out loud. And they're like, we love that you do. Well, then I started speaking to men and they resonated with it. Well, then 2013, I started a blog, The Good Dad Project. 2015, started the Good Dad Project podcast. I changed the name in 2018 to The Dad Edge. Been podcasting for the past 6.5, 7 years, 800 interviews. Started our mastermind back in 2016. And what I can tell you is, man, it's been a front row seat to the most amazing education that I've ever had. I'm now in a season where I'm raising teenagers, and that's a whole new level of things I don't understand and trying to figure out. But really, it's a mission to help imperfect men, imperfect fathers, imperfect husbands, just learn a thing or two. I mean, I like the farmer's insurance thing. It's like, I know a thing or two because I've seen a thing or two at this point. And not perfect by any means. If I have my kids here, they would tell you there's shit that happens every day, that there's mistakes that's made, there's things you say, but I know how to pivot faster now and get out of my own way better now.
Yeah, that's an interesting one, the ability to pivot quicker and get out of your own way faster. Definitely something I've been working on a long time. You know, that normalizing that lack of intimacy in marriage is such an interesting thing. I did it too. I did it too in my previous marriage, to where, well, of course, like that's how it goes. You're together for long enough, and then the chemistry changes, and then your stress changes, and especially once you throw kids in the mix. Yeah, because then you're a united front that's parents, kids,
right,
and that switches quickly away from that identity role of lover, of those type of things, and that's tough because without taking care of that part, the united front as parents gets different.
It does. Yeah. You want to hear some scary statistics?
Yeah.
Well, everybody knows the divorce rate is what?
61 or so, 61%?
It's right around 51% now. Okay. But here's what people don't know. The 50% or 49%, whatever you want to say, 50% of people that stay together, they're actually divided up equally into 3 camps, 1/3, 1/3, and 1/3. 1/3 of marriages that stay together can actually say, yeah, this relationship is awesome. It's everything I ever wanted. I wouldn't change much of anything. I love her. She loves me. All that stuff. Like, it's working. It's good. The next 1/3 is like, it's all right.
No, it's fallacy of sunk cost.
Yeah.
Is what that middle third is, right? It's like, well, I've already done this for 10 years. I'm not starting a new relationship.
Right.
Especially not if you think this is how they play out. Why would I bother?
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's pretty much the mindset in that camp. They're like, it's okay. It's not the best thing in the world.
Good enough.
It's good enough. It's
comfortable.
I don't really want to break up. That's expensive, right? I
mean, that's a crazy thought too.
Yeah, it is. Well, then there's the final 1/3. The final 1/3, they have no connection. They're living under the same roof as strangers, no intimacy, no connection. They're basically staying together for logistical reasons. Their view is the top 2 reasons they'll stay together is kids, finances. So 2 financially devastating to break up. But they're really just both of them are living totally separate individual lives. But yeah, those are the numbers.
And the staying together one for the kids is a really tricky one. And I understand the draw toward making that decision. And the fallacy that works for the stay together for the kids thing is the lie that you tell yourself that your kids don't know better.
Oh my God. They know, right? They know. They can see it. They feel it. They can't necessarily describe it depending on what age they're at, but they feel it.
Yeah, they know when mom and dad aren't happy.
Oh, totally.
Or meshing. And then the problem with that too that I see is, you know, I realize how much I set the idea of a relationship based on my parents because that's who I'm around growing up. And so what's normal is what's normal to you.
Yeah.
You know, what we talked about at the very, very top of the show. Your kids are going to look at your relationship as normal.
Yep.
And so are you setting the bar of normal as two people who get along is enough?
Or we just kind of like exist.
Right.
Yeah.
That mom and dad are just,
yeah, they're just there.
you know, or kids bottle it up too with the, you know, my parents weren't happy and they did it for us.
Yeah.
And so I'll do that. I'll be a martyr the next run.
I think a lot of people, exactly what you just said. And a lot of people, what they'll do is they'll think, well, we got to stay together for the kids because what are we teaching them if we break up? And then what you are actually teaching them is they have a front row seat to a very dysfunctional relationship. And then they think, well, that's what marriage is. So I need to go out and find that. And then they'll replicate it. My wife and I, like I said, the first half of our marriage wasn't that great. But what we have now, I mean, man, I've known her for 18 years. I've known her for 25 years, been married for 18 years. I would definitely say the past 6 years have only gotten better and better and better. And I gross my kids out every single day. And I'm going to say something that I think a lot of your listeners may or may not agree with, but I truly believe this because I've seen the effects personally, and I've seen the effects of guys who do life with us. If you're a parent first and married second, you got it wrong.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
I agree with that 100%.
Good. Yeah. Because I think if you're a parent first and your spouse comes, and I'm not saying like if your kid is hurt, no, me and mom are hanging out. Yeah. You know, it's like,
Sure.
I know you cracked your head open, but whatever. Right. We don't do that. But at the same time, a lot of us are just like, no, the kids come first. And when the kids see that, like my kids fully know, man, all four of my boys, like, hey man, your mom is first priority, then you.
Right.
And I don't mean that like she's first and then you are way down here. Like she's here and you're like a micro fraction underneath that, but she comes first.
If you zoom in really close, though, that micro fraction gets really wide.
Yeah. Right.
It depends. It depends on what
Yeah.
No, I mean, I think that's so important though, but like that's such a simple message that I see in so many different ways. And whether that's taking care of yourself physically, whether that's doing any of these other type of things, taking care of the marriage as the priority over the kids is a putting your oxygen mask on before you help someone else scenario.
Yep.
And that's, we do it a ton.
Mm-hmm.
And we convince ourselves that this is the way, that I can take care of me later. But you don't realize just what a vacuum of energy and problem you're creating on the back end of that by not sourcing your own shit. And so I'm not surprised at all to hear that your relationship after this, you know, after 18 years of marriage and 25 years together, I mean, you've heard everything that's going to come out of that person's mouth. You know their movie references, you know the things they've seen, you know it. And so having something new to talk about and be driven with together and grow together with, that's the passion that's changed your relationship by starting this project.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
And leaning into other people.
Right.
You know, it's not a surprise that you have found, I'm also not surprised that you have a sales background. This also adds up. But your ability now to stay on the side of give, it's such a hack once it makes sense to you. And it did for me as well. That the more that I seem to stay in giving into the relationships I'm involved with, the more that I'm getting out of it personally, growth-wise, hell, on all fronts. And I just love hearing that we have to manage this thing because, you know, sexless marriage sucks.
Yeah, it does.
I mean, I'm not in any way, look, sex is a big part of my life. I like it. I plan to have more of it. I don't particularly want to not have a reason to have less of it.
Right.
And so, man, that intimacy and connection is huge. And I don't know if people get weird about the idea of their kids knowing they have sex. You know, I had a honest conversation with my mom. So after Dad's passed, I've tried to do more fun things with my mom. She came to Iceland with us this past year with a group trip, and
that's awesome.
Last year, Bonnie and she had never been to the Grand Canyon, so we rented a RV last year and we drove out to the Grand Canyon with my mom, and got a lot of time to just talk. And one of the things I had asked her, I was like, did you ever smoke? Because Dad smoked cigarettes all the time. And I don't remember how we got to this conversation. But other than I remember my mom blatantly as a kid telling me she never did. And she's like, yeah, occasionally I smoked.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay. And she's like, well, you know, like, she's like, I'm sure you don't want to know this, but after sex, I, you know, had to have a cigarette, right? And I'm like, I kind of leaned over and I was like, yeah, I'm happy my parents had a fucking good sex life.
Yeah. Yeah.
That would be a real bummer to me if you didn't.
Right.
Like I'm glad to be at a point in my life now to look at my parents as humans.
Yeah.
That took a lot of being able to see that changed a lot of how I wanted to go forward and realize that there aren't rails that you're on for the standard path. And so this has just continued to grow now, this project of you having this passion of genuinely looking into this growth of how do I get better? Let's pick one thing a day.
Yeah. Yeah. It really turned into, I guess it's more of a movement now, which has been great. But like I said, man, you know, I'm happy to share like how I grew up because like, I think it'll do two things, you know, I'll share a couple things of why I'm doing what I'm doing, but also like the ramifications of men who don't put their, as you say, put their oxygen mask on first, or don't learn a thing or two, and the devastating effects of what could happen.
And is that what you saw home growing up as a kid? And when did you realize that that's what you're seeing?
Yeah, I mean, so I'll share with you what happened, because some of it's pretty entertaining. Yeah. Like, so I was born in 1975. My mom and biological father were married for like 5 years before I came along. After I was born, though, my mom and dad split, and I was with my mom exclusively. So I have no recollection of my biological father at all. And so from 0 to 4, no father in my life whatsoever. I was just raised by my mom. And I'll never forget, man, being 4 years old in preschool, and I saw men come and pick up their kids from school. So I knew what a dad was. But in my 4-year-old mind, man, I was like, oh, well, you know, moms go out and find dads. Like that, my mom just hasn't found my dad yet, which is okay. I don't really care. I'm not really.
Oh, what an interesting perspective.
It gets better.
Okay.
It gets better. So I'll never forget, 4 years old, my mom brings home a guy for the first time to meet me. She brought him over for dinner. They worked together. And I was like, oh my God, like I've never seen a guy in this house. So door knock on the door, opens up, and we're talking 1979. So he comes walking in. He's got a trench coat on. He worked for Citicorp. He was a data software engineer, like white collar worker, had a 3-piece suit on, double Windsor knot, had the feathered hair. You know, yeah, handlebar mustache. My mom introduces me to him. She's like, Larry, this is Joe. Joe, this is Larry. I shook his hand, and the very first thing that came out of my mouth was, are you going to be my dad?
Wow. Just the straight comic clip.
Right to it, man.
Oh, man, that is the movie rom-com, like, are you new dad? And he just fucking fast feets it out the door.
Yeah. Or like Buddy the Elf, like,
smoke cloud, right? Smoke cloud behind him and the door slams.
Yeah.
Like, shit.
But no, man, I actually remember like it being really awkward in the room. Like, it's just laughing. Like, so anyway, they got married. Within a year, they got married. I think my mom kind of took that as a sign, like, I really need to find a father for this kid. I don't think she really loved him very much. I think she wanted to.
What a weird cascading of action.
Yeah, it was definitely different. But they did get married. He traveled a lot. So from 5 to 10, he was around. But he was a drinker, like a big, big drinker.
Sales guy?
Yeah. He was a software engineer. But he did drink a lot. And when he did drink, he got pretty abusive, like physically, mentally, emotionally. You know, my mom and him would get into, I mean, dude, the cops were called on my house. Like cops would show up and the neighbors could hear them fighting. And, you know, he had a heavy hand with me. I won't go into all the details, but it was like, man, this is kind of rough, right? Well, by the time I was 10, their relationship was I mean, it was in the tank. It was awful. Like they were in that third camp. Like they were just existing under the same roof. Actually, he lived downstairs in our house. My mom was upstairs.
Yeah. So they don't even talk.
They
Their
don't even
ship's
talk.
in the night.
Yeah. And he actually lost his job at that point. I would go downstairs because he would sleep all day. And I would go downstairs and he would be sleeping on the patio furniture cushions on the cold foundational floor. And I would just go down there like 3 times a day and just put my hands on him and be like, just make sure you're still alive. And that was crazy. Then they got
So he's severely depressed and
man.
alcoholic.
Yeah. Like his life was just a shit show at that point. They ended up getting divorced. I've never seen him since. I actually found out 7 years ago he passed away. So anyway, fast forward to, I started really asking questions. I'm like, hey, wait a second. Like this guy came around when I was 5. I knew about the birds and the bees at that point. I'm like, hey, where did I come from? Because at that point I didn't know. My mom was like, I was actually married before and you have a biological father. I was like, well, why don't we see him? And she's like, oh, it was a really bad divorce. Like we just don't see him. I was like, well, where is he? She's like, I don't know. So I was 12 and I won't go into the details for the sake of time, but I ran into him by accident. Like,
well, you ran into your biological father on accident?
Well, I'll share the story so I didn't run into him. I actually ran into his wife. I just kind of shortened the story, but here's how it worked.
You're how old at this time?
I'm 12.
Okay.
So I'm in 7th grade. I was playing basketball with a friend at a rec center right down the street from my house. I knew my dad's name. His name's Larry Boyd, not a very common name. And I was getting the basketball and the clerk behind the desk looked over my shoulder. He's like, oh, here comes Mrs. Boyd to make the hockey payment. I'm like, and I just look behind me. I see this lady and I was like, Mrs. Boyd. I was like, what's her name? And he's like, Lisa. And I was like, what's her husband's name? I was just very curious, bold kid. He's like, Larry. He plays hockey up here. And I was like, holy shit. I think that's my dad's wife. Whoa. So I was just bold, very curious kid. I just kind of waited for her. And then I walked up to her. I was like, hey, what's your name? And she just kind of looked at me like, what's this 12-year-old kid doing coming up to me? And she told me, and I was like, are you married to a guy named Larry? And she said, yeah. And I go, it sounds weird, but I think your husband's my dad. And she looked at me and she knew right away. She's like, are you Larry? And I'm like, yeah. And she goes, yes, I am married to your dad. Would you like to talk to him? Wow. And I was like, yeah, I would. I never talked to him at that point. We went never.
No idea of how he looks.
I knew what he looked like because I saw photos. Okay. That was it. And we went around the corner to a payphone. She puts a quarter in and she's like, yeah, so hey, I'm up here at the rec center. I ran into your son. He'd like to talk to you. And she just handed the phone over to me and I could hear his voice and you could just tell. He was like, I don't even remember how the conversation went. I just remember how it felt. And you could tell he didn't know what to say.
I guess not.
Yeah, not at all.
I mean, I very quickly putting myself into the empathy role of that guy and getting that phone call and like,
right. Cause you're like in your 30s, right?
38. Yeah.
So he was right around the same age, never really hung out with me. And then
knows you exist.
No, I exist. Yeah.
Okay.
He knew, obviously I was only about a year old when they broke up. He was married at the time, obviously 2-year-old son, another one on the way. And I went home, I told my mom, I was like, you'll never guess who I talked to today. And she was not very happy about it, but I was like, hey, can I meet him? Like, I really want to meet him. Met him. We hung out and he came to all my Little League games. We hung out every week. We hung out for 6 months. And you ever know when you're dating somebody and there comes a point where you're like, I don't think she's into me anymore. Like she's kind of pulling the fade away. Like I'm just feeling like they're just not into it anymore. Well, after like 6 months, it was like that last month, like I could tell like something was heavy on my dad, but I couldn't put my finger on it. I mean, dude, I was so excited to just be around him because I was like, right away, I started calling him dad. And finally I called him one day and I'm like, hey, I was like, is everything okay? Like, I just feel like something's not right. Is everything okay with us? And I don't even remember how the conversation went, but basically the theme was, it's me, it's not you. This is not a good time. We should probably part ways. And I was like, wow, okay. And I just remember getting really pissed off.
Yeah.
And that was it. And so parted ways. My mom dated several men, got married one more time when I was 18, but several men in between. Every guy was the same type of guy, just heavy drinker, abuser. So I had half my childhood was spent without a father figure. The other half was spent with just some random crazy dude in my life. But here's where the story kind of culminates. So I'm 30 years old. I'm in medical device sales. I meet one of my partners who shares a territory with me for a business meeting at Starbucks in West County here in St. Louis. I'm sitting there drinking my coffee, going over our numbers, customers. I look over who's in line to get his morning coffee. My father. Hadn't seen him in 18 years. Last time I saw him, he was just like, hey.
Was a phone call that said we shouldn't talk anymore. Yeah.
I knew it was him right away.
Like there wasn't another reach out or try?
No.
Holy fuck. Okay.
That was it. Yeah. And so anyway, the girl that I was with, my coworker, she was like, "Are you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost."
Yep.
I was like, "Well,
I did."
Yeah. I was like, "You see that guy over there?" I was like, "It's my father." And she's like, "Holy shit! Like, what are you gonna say?" And I was like, "Nothing. Like nothing. Like last time I saw him, I was 12. He told me it was not time. I was like, I'm nothing." Without another word, she didn't say anything. She just got up and went over to him.
Fuck, I would have done the same.
Really?
No fucking way are you getting out of that situation.
Yeah. She didn't let me. She let me off the hook. So anyway, like he's like 50 feet away from me. And I'm like, what the hell's going on? I saw them talking and I couldn't hear him, but I could read his lips. And he said, "Where is he?" And he started looking around and like our eyes met. And I was like, oh my God. And there's a part of me, man, I was like, do I run? Do I go to the bathroom? Do I leave? Do I kick his ass? Like,
so what, he's 50 at this point, right? Like,
yeah, he's like right around, 50, mid 50s. And he comes over, shakes my hand. He's like, "Hey man, like, how are you doing?" And I'm like, "Fine. How are you?" Like, I wasn't nice. I wasn't,
of course.
I wasn't nice and I wasn't
Why would
mean.
you be?
Yeah. I was just sort of like, we should get together. Like I make my dad sound like a bum. He's not. He's actually a very successful entrepreneur. He's like, "We should get together for breakfast." And I'm like, all right. I was like, I'll tell you what, here's my card. I was like, if you want to talk, we can talk. So I think it like 24 hours later, I checked my email and there was like this huge email from him, just basically like, "Hey, I've thought about this for years. Like, you've been on my mind every day for the past 18 years. Like, like how we parted ways, it didn't sit well with me, yada, yada, yada." He's like, "But I'd really like to get together." Like, it was a very genuine email. We got together. Well, here we are 16 years later, and I still have a relationship with him, and a good one. I've got 2 younger half brothers, amazing relationship with them. He's still married to the same woman, and we have a relationship. But what I can tell you is how I grew up, I didn't know what the hell I was doing. It's almost the best way I can compare it was after growing up like that, I was like, I'm going to be a good father and I'm going to be a good husband. I'm not going to get divorced. I'm going to try everything that I possibly can to make things work. And I know all these things that I shouldn't do. And if I can compare it, it's almost like you going to be coached to do powerlifting, shot put, discus, or hammer. And your coach tells you, "Hey man, here's 20 things not to do when you throw that discus. And best of luck with the other."
Yeah.
Right. So
just don't do these. You'll be fine.
Right. Just don't do all this stuff and you'll be fine. That doesn't make you a competitive world-class athlete. And it sure as hell did make me a world-class father or husband. In fact, it put me in this place of complete and total limbo of like, I don't know what good looks like, but I only know what bad looks like, which if what we focus on expands. And if I focused on like, this is all the things I don't want to be, it was all the things that I was becoming. Now, I never was extreme. I never abused my kids. I never yelled. I never, called them names. I never emotionally abused them, but I sure as hell wasn't showing up. I was like half in, half out. Yeah,
man. I have a couple questions from that. Holy shit. I don't have anything like that in my childhood. And so I'm always fascinated by it and what we find normal. So like questions for you as well, right? Like, so once you meet your dad at 13 and kind of you're hanging out for 6 months, right?
Yeah.
I assume you're getting a little bit of a view of his life.
Yeah, I was.
How is it compared to the one that you're living without him in it?
Totally different. The woman he's married to, the woman he's still married to, so functional, so supportive, no chaos, no cops called on their family or anything like that. It seemed like a very stable environment, and mine was not. I mean, my mom had a good heart, but she was also a partier. Mm-hmm. There was a ton of drinking. As far as I know, there still is. And there was constant uncertainty, unpredictability in my house at all times.
I mean, so how much leads to that now at 13 of this rejection from this other life that you're starting to at least get a glimpse in and maybe start to get to share some of. I bet that's a huge hit.
It was, I think it was, at that point, like, I'll be honest, man, I did not grow up as an athlete. Like, I was overweight as a kid. I really, really wanted that male role model in my life. I wanted a stable environment. I couldn't say that then. I didn't know that. But looking back on it, that's what I wanted. And then when that went away, I was like, man, it just felt like the biggest kick in the balls. Like, and not like, here's the thing. I don't blame my father. It sounds really weird, but I think my dad made the best decision.
Look, it's really fucking complicated. It's
is.
Not at all fair to be like, why did he do that?
Right.
It's not fair.
I think my dad made the best decision he could at the time that made sense to him at the time. And what he realized is it wasn't a really good decision. And we all do that. We're all guilty of that. But what I can tell you is kind of being cast aside and then going back to that sort of crazy, unpredictable home life again was like, oh God, like, what are the next few years going to look like?
No, I'm sure. I'm sure. Cause I mean, this is your first reference to what could have been.
Yeah.
You know, for a lack of a better term, of what your life is supposed to be like with dad.
Right.
Right. And especially at that age, you can't quite understand the intricacies of how things actually work and play out, that it doesn't copy and paste over one to the other.
Right.
But at that age, it's really complicated.
It is. It's hard.
I guess another question with that is when in that process for you, did you develop empathy for your father to realize how tough that all has to be as well?
That's a good question. So my dad and I have very rarely talked about the past. And my dad's 73 years old. He's actually very young at heart. He's a pretty youthful guy for 73. And I think it was probably a year into our relationship. I was like, hey man, can we go out to dinner? And I think he knew. Like, I got
questions.
Yeah, I got questions. And I basically premised the dinner with this. I was like, I don't want to beat this up. I want to have maybe one or two conversations around this, and then I just don't want to talk.
If we can have an honest conversation about it, that I'm not emotionally reacting and I just need you to state facts of where you were.
Right.
Then we can go forward.
Yeah.
Right. But I need to know some of these answers.
And that's exactly what it was. And I just basically asked him, I was like, can you just tell me what the hell happened? Like, I think I literally started off with that. I was like, tell me what happened when I was little, and then tell me what happened when I was 12. Because I truly don't understand. And he told me, he was like, listen, man, I was 21 when me and your mom got married. We were young, right? And then I was 25 when you came along. Like, I was still 25.
He's 25 and learns out that, like, this other kid's like, he's barely keeping it together. He's 25. He's got 2 kids and a wife, and like, he is trying to keep this bubble running.
No, not at that part yet. Okay. It was just me at 25. He was about 35 when he had that going on. But like 25, fresh out of the military, had seen war, that kind of thing. And then, then comes me, and, my mom and him, they were young. They went through a pretty bad divorce. And he was like, listen, man, he's like, me and your mom's divorce was ugly. It was really bad. He was like, there was infidelity on both sides. It wasn't good. He's like, and I was a kid. I made stupid mistakes. He goes, here's the thing. I actually thought at my young age that you were better off without me. And dude, that hurts my heart a little bit, because I work with men like that now. And I know that.
I know men who feel that way.
Yeah.
I know people who feel that way.
Right.
It's not unique to us.
It's not. And my dad told me, he was like, dude, the day that I signed over parental rights to your stepfather, Joe, he was like, I don't know if I stopped crying for 24 hours. He's like, it was horrible. And so I got to see that very human side of my dad. And this man that I'm like, God, there's a part of me, right? I'm like, dude, you're such a jerk, man. And so then when I asked him, I was like, well, what happened when I was 12, man? And he was like, okay. He's like, well, you just kind of came in. He's like, I at that point kind of started over. I'd been married for a while, 2-year-old son, another one on the way. He was like, and there were a lot of complexities with that. Like, your mom was not necessarily being the easiest person to work with. And she and I still had kind of like beef with each other. We weren't really arguing, but she wasn't making it easy. And
right. So she knows y'all are communicating.
Oh yeah.
And seeing each other. I'm sure at that point she's driving to.
Yeah. And he's like, and I'm trying to keep like my wife happy and all this. And he's like, it just got to be like an overload. And he's like, and I honestly thought we would all be better off if we just went our separate ways. And he goes, and I got to be honest, dumb decision, really dumb decision. He goes, I thought it made sense and then it just didn't. And he's like, I have to live with that. And I was like, and I saw that remorse in his eyes. Like, I have to live with that. I still have to live with that. And I was like, and I thought about my own kids. What would it be like if I had to have that conversation with my boys? And I would be freaking devastated, man. I would feel like a 50-pound rucksack on my back at all times.
All the time.
So there was a part of me at that point where I'm like, okay, he's a human being. And I can either focus on the past and be a victim and like, I'm so wronged and all this other BS, or I can enjoy what time we have.
Dude, that bruised ego of yourself, of a person that is still dealing with self-worth issues, any of these type of things that come from rejection and any of this, especially from parents. If you're not willing, like if you're going to only operate to try to make that past ego full, it's a losing battle. That barrel can't get filled up. Like you can't fix any of those things. The only thing we can do is accept and try to move forward.
Right.
And man, I think it's such an interesting concept, and it's strange to me, right? Because as kids looking at parents, and especially as you're developing, parents are authority, which means they know better. And so you give them that type of thing. I mean, hell, I was raised in a way of like, yo, if an adult tells you a thing, that means jump.
Right. Exactly.
Like, what do you mean you said no to an adult? Like, that's definitely something I would have got spanked or any of those type of things over as a young kid. So it's easy from the kid's perspective to think parents know, parents are adults, parents are the responsible ones. Those are the ones we're learning from. And then as you become an adult yourself and you realize how little anyone has a fucking clue of what they're doing with their lives, or information they take in, or trying to get better, or what trauma and damage that they got along the way. And you don't think of your parents as complete humans. The same way you don't think about your teachers.
Right.
For a long time. Like, she doesn't go home and have shit to do. Like, she's a teacher. Right. That's it. She hangs out here. I show up at school, and then I imagine they put her in a box, and then she immediately comes back out to teach, right?
Yeah.
And so it's really tough to have that perspective of your parents. And then once you can, and then give it to yourself, that we're just trying to figure it out, and have some of that empathy for those people. It gets really, really heavy, man.
If you want, I got something to say on that. I think it might make you laugh. My 15-year-old and I were talking about this, and he goes, "What's it like to be a dad?" I was like, "You want to know?" And he's like, "Yeah." I was like, "You really want to know?" He's like, "Yeah." I was like, "Well, I'll explain this part first. It is the most enjoyable, most rewarding, yet hardest and humbling job I've ever had in my life." I was like, and here's the funny thing. You probably look at me as if I know what I'm doing at all times, and what I'm talking about, I know everything about it, and I know everything about life. I was like, am I wrong with that? He's like, no, actually, that's pretty dead on. I was like, yeah, that's a big lie. I'm still figuring out so much crap. I was like, I don't feel much different than when I did when I was actually your age. I was like, here's a perfect perspective. I go, you know how you feel on the first day of school? He's like, oh, yeah. I was like, well, today you're 15 years old and 3 months. And this is my first day raising a 15-year-old in 3 months. I was like, and tomorrow will be my first day raising a 15-year-old in 91 days. I was like, so it's my first day at school every day. And you could just see like the humanity, I think, that he saw. He was like, I never thought of it that way. I was like, yeah. I was like, I'm never going to always be right. I was like, my son, all my boys are like, you're a great dad. I love my life. I love when they say stuff like that. I was like, I appreciate that. And when you're my age, you're going to have baggage because I said shit to you, that's going to come back and haunt you. I was like, but just know that I did the best I could with what I had. I did make mistakes, but I've really freaking tried to make it as few as I could.
Now, with your group and dealing with this, I mean, while I understand that the group isn't group therapy,
Right.
but it also isn't not group therapy. That's how things like these seem to work out, especially if you have an honest, safe place for people to express themselves and question. Like that's the big one, right? Is like, yo, feel free to question, because maybe it's something we're all missing. And I love that you've provided a safe opportunity for people who give a fuck. And it's crazy to me, right? That you know, I think about this and recommending your thing to a handful of people. And it's funny that I already feel like a weird wall to be like, yo, I know it's going to be a little weird for you to do that, but I think it could be good. And if you can allow yourself to get into feeling a little bit more kooky, blah, 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 touchy-feely, that it'll improve everything. And it's a real bummer that I have to feel like I have to preface something that I think's good with that like, it may be emotional. And I think most of the people I'm around have a pretty decent emotional intelligence. And I still feel like I would have to preface it.
Yeah.
It's so strange that our generation has carried that through childhood, that we're I don't know how the ones go forward go, right? Like in the same way that the world of our youth doesn't exist anymore.
Right.
And so we are now a group that talks more about problems. We are trying to work more on existential crisis. We are trying to do things like that. And part of that is too, things are more comfortable. You don't get to work on the things if you have to figure out where food comes from tonight.
Right. I agree. Yeah. Well, the other thing too is I think we're seeing a generation of men and fathers who are hungry for this, to be honest. I mean, like, I think about my grandfather, right? Who is a great man, awesome guy. It was a front row seat to see how a marriage should work. He loved my grandmother to the
And
day.
this is mom's dad.
Yeah.
I assume.
Yeah. I didn't have a very good father figure, but I did have this amazing grandfather that I spent a ton of time with. He lived a mile from my house, very functional guy. I think he really saw a lot of the stuff that was going on. He really stepped up, but he loved my grandmother to death. Like, she worshiped the ground that she walked on, not in an emasculated way, but like a very manly way. Right. But, you know, I think my grandfather's generation was like, provide, be quiet, be tough, man up. Right.
Very much.
And then that's the way our fathers were probably raised in that environment. Right. And it was just like, no, this is what I do. And, you know, we don't talk about stuff, and we just sort of grit it out. And, you know, some men have been lucky enough, like yourself, like have a good relationship with their dad, and some didn't. But I think a lot of guys now are feeling the effects of that and be like, you know what? No, I want more. I want to have really good connections with my kids. I want them to know their dad. I want to spend time with them. I want to create memories with them. I want to teach them things. I want to be in it, like in it, not just like providing and I show up at dinner. Like, I want to be in it. And I think that's what we're seeing.
Present.
Yeah.
Yeah. Present. And, you know, one of the things that you said really early in this that I really think matters is that a lot of time for any type of growth, until you can admit that you don't know what you're doing, it's really hard to learn more things.
Yep.
That's what the problem with knowing everything is you can't learn anything new. And like, what an asshole way to operate life.
Yeah.
It seems the older I get, and like what you talked about with, you know, that you feel the same way you did at 25, right? 100%. There's still plenty of times in my life, like we just bought a house that we're going to turn into a rental property and start doing some Airbnbs and stuff like that. And this is the 4th house I've bought. And every time I go through it, I'm like, they're going to let me buy a house.
Yeah.
I didn't have to get any adult permission from this. Like, I don't know who that would be at this point, right?
Yeah,
but like, even that, or like car rentals, or there's just occasionally moments where I feel like there's someone else I should be having to ask for permission, like starting an LLC or doing, it's just weird shit that like, I don't know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And admitting you don't know what you're doing is such a help.
It is.
Because then you're willing to just open up to anything instead of, God forbid, anyone think I don't know what I'm doing. Let me give, for anyone out there who's afraid to admit they don't know what they're doing based on what someone else thinks, no one knows. And also, everyone's worried about their own shit. They're not worried about yours. So work on you.
Yep.
And admit you don't know and learn.
Yep.
Man, having a group like this that starts allowing people to open up and express, and then I'm sure work through trauma, which is a big part of it too. I don't know if that's a big overview of the group, or is it more focused on practical skills that you guys are?
We, we have 700 guys that do life with us on the daily. We got a variety of men, right? Variety of men from all walks of life and experiences. I would say for the most part, what we have in the group is, there's some guys who've been through trauma. I mean, we're not experts in that. We're more of like a social support. What we do is we teach our men practical skills.
Sure.
So like, for instance, like, hey, if you want to communicate better with your wife, you have to learn tactical empathy. You have to learn mirroring. You have to learn emotional validation. You have to create an environment of psychological safety. And here's how you do that. So we teach skills like that along with several other skills. But it's really men who come and do life with us. They're like, you know what? I'm sick and tired of not knowing exactly what to do. Not how to communicate with my wife, how to connect with my wife, how to have more patience with my kids, how to take better care of myself physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. I want to be a better leader. I want to be a better speaker, communicator, all these things. And they're like, and I'm sick and tired of not knowing how to do those things.
Right.
So we have a lot of guys who are just like, you know what? I just want to come in here. I want to learn some of these skills. I want to elevate my life. I want to elevate my relationships. I want to elevate my confidence around all these things. And I want to be surrounded by other men who want to do that too.
I think that's the biggest one.
Yeah.
And I think it really does come down to community. And that's what I really believe CrossFit nailed.
Yeah.
Oddly enough.
Yeah, right.
That I didn't think CrossFit realized they nailed. But at least toward the end of Glassman's run throughout that. But needless to say, that's what they did, dude. You put together this community of people that got together every week and suffered together through the same workout. It's not the same at a gym that people aren't taking a class. There's a competitive drive to it. There's a ranking system. We can see progress. There's something about that group suffering.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that community thing is really, really important. And it gets very strange the more we are remote. I personally do very, very well with remote. I've done it now as an outside sales rep for a long time. And then now I've become an entrepreneur, and I essentially exist between my house, which is 2 miles from here and here. I don't deal with normal people on a regular basis.
Right.
I don't go to the store. I don't do any of that. And so the advantage of that is the people I deal with, I really want to deal with. And being able to kind of mitigate the frustration of people who don't want to get better, getting close to me has helped me a lot. It skews my perspective on people a lot because all the people I deal with are trying to kick ass. And so I think most people are trying to kick ass. They're not.
Right. They're not.
The news proves me drastically otherwise.
Right.
Like, what traps do you see that dads are getting caught in? Like, is the social media thing, like, because I picture that a younger guy's thing, but now since I don't have kids, it's hard for me to realize what traps in social media are hitting dads or parents for that matter, that they don't know how to navigate. Is there just too much information there as well?
So this might put some things in perspective. I saw a meme. Actually, I don't think it was a meme. I think actually Andy Frisella said this, and it made a lot of sense, which is there's 3 types of men in the world. There's the victim, there's the content zombie, and there's the executor. The victim will basically tell you every reason why they're not successful in their life or a certain area. They're like, I'm not good in my marriage. I'm not a good communicator in my marriage. And I've always been that way. I was raised that way. My dad wasn't a good communicator, so I'm not. I actually had a guy. I can't even make this up. A guy told me, I have anger issues because it runs in my family. It's actually in my DNA.
Genetic.
Right. And I'm like, really? I was like,
you don't understand how DNA works.
Yeah, no, I was like, why don't we cut you open and you tell me where this is at? But anyway, and then when they lose their patience or they lose their cool, like this guy loses, he's like, see?
It's not my fault.
Yeah.
What an interesting thing. It's not my fault.
It's not my fault. There's the proof. That's the victim. The content zombie, which I think what you're kind of getting to, we're living in this generation now, or this era. There's so much information at your fingertips that you could literally devour information by the minute.
Yeah, if you don't have a filter for the information, it's a real problem.
It is. But a lot of people are very hungry. Like, I can't even tell you like how many guys would be like, I listen to 5 hours of podcasts a day. And I'm like, why? Right.
Why? Yeah. How do you decipher, and then how do you process any of that?
But what happens is they're like, well, if I devour information, my life will get better. And that's not the case. You're exposed to, like, take a book, for instance.
But that's like saying, if I don't take medicine, I'm not sick.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It's the opposite, that's not how it works.
It's not how it works. But a lot of people who are content zombies will take it, and that's great. That's, at least you're moving out of the victim camp. But content zombie, people who consume content with, if you really talk to them, they're like, yeah, life has gotten a little better, but not like a ton. But that's when the person's like, okay, I'm going to take this idea and I'm going to go do something with it.
Yeah. My question would be for the content zombie, is life better when you're consuming these things that you believe are helping you? And then when you're not doing that, it's tricky because you're not putting any of it into play.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing, is the action,
right?
It's really the action. But I think you asked how men are getting tripped up. A lot of guys think that if guys will get tripped up in that victim mindset, and it could be in their finances, could be in their health, could be in their marriage, could be in anything, but they'll actually have a story that they have a conclusion of where they're at in life because of something. Men also get tripped up in like, well, if I read a book and listen to podcasts, my life will get better. But that's not the case. Where the rubber really meets the road is where, like, so for instance, let's put this back in your perspective. When you were doing shot put, discus, and hammer, your coach would be like, hey man, great throw, but this is what I need you to do next. Do this thing next. Focus on this thing next. This movement, this throw, this dynamic, or whatever. And then you're like, okay, I'm doing that next. And then you go out and you do it. And you execute it, you get better and better and better and better because of the action that you take. And a lot of guys, they never understand that bridge, that gap right there of like, okay, I need to actually do something with this information. And here's the other thing too. Most men have zero accountability in their life. Zero. So just because they learn something by being a content zombie, that doesn't mean they're going to go out and execute it because they don't have anybody to answer to. So we're not going to do that. I can't remember exactly what I saw, but if you have an idea, you're 10% likely to do it. If you state the idea out loud, then you have a 25% chance of actually doing it. If you state the idea out loud and then put a timestamp on it, then you're like 50% more likely to do it. But if someone else holds you accountable to go do it, like, hey man, I'm checking in with you on Friday to make sure you did that thing. You're 96% likely to go do it.
Interesting. I don't know how you would run those statistics, but I like it.
Well, 82% of people that quote statistics make them up.
Yeah, so. Perfect.
But no, that came from.
No, but whether the statistics are legit or not, it's real. Yeah. It is anecdotal, especially that very first one of like, yo, put it into the fucking universe.
Yeah, go
being able to say something out loud and say this is where we're going gives it life.
Right.
And in the same way with that, like, I've been really fortunate, and over the last, I mean, the whole time I competed doing any of those things, I got to live out a bunch of really cool dreams in my life and continuing to do so. And I fully believe that if you don't put it out there, like, the universe is of no obligation to help you through this thing.
Agreed.
It is completely indifferent to your plight. Yep. It doesn't care if you're happy. It doesn't care if you're sad. All of it exists within. It doesn't mean you can't figure out how to surf it a little bit.
Yep.
And there is some of that. And that being able to put intention out there and let go of expectation seems to make a big help for me.
Agreed.
Man, I saw one of the things you guys announced this weekend was your son wrote a book.
He did. Yeah. Yeah, he did.
That's incredible. Yeah. That's such an incredible thing.
Thanks, man. Yeah, he, so tell you the story behind that. If you really look at his book, so his book is Never Give Up No Matter What. It's a children's book. It's meant for either a kid to read it or for a parent to read it to the kid. Yeah, because if you think about it, like kids, like, give up on something, right? My son was 8 when he started tackle football. He's 13 now. He's been doing it for 5 years. And when he was 8, he's a very athletic kid. He was, at the time, he had 3 years of wrestling in him. So he was pretty athletic even at the time. And he was working his ass off in practice, like in the St. Louis August humidity, like full pads, like working his ass off 3 times, 4 times a week, and then games. And he was benched the entire season. And basically watching, not the entire season, he played here and there, but minimal. And it finally got up to the point we have a quote in our house, and that is we don't give up on anything. So like for instance, in our house, if you commit to playing baseball, you're in for the season.
You're in for the season.
There's no
100%.
If you don't want to do it after that, no worries. So I could tell like this was taking a massive toll on my 8-year-old. And it's hard as a parent to see your kid going through that. Like I was like, shit, man. Like I don't know how much more this kid's got in him. Like he is working his ass off. Wasn't being played. And then finally it was like the last few weeks of the season, and I sat him, he was devastated.
Now, are you able to watch as a dad and realize he's not getting played because X, Y, and Z? Like there are better athletes or better options as a coach? Like I'm curious, is it a bullshit politics thing that you're like, I don't know why they're not playing him, he should be?
Yeah, I'm so with 4 boys and I've coached teams myself. Like my view of it is like I let the coaches do their job. Like
100%.
I do. Like I don't get involved with that. I don't be like, hey man, why is my kid not being played? I always tell my kid, you want to be played, work harder.
Or the same way I would respond, but as I don't have kids, I don't know. It's a theory of how I would handle that situation, right? And so that's my question of like, I've always thought that since as an athlete, I'd be able to objectionably look at him and be like, well, he's not playing because he's not as good as the other kids.
He was like middle of the road.
Okay.
And but I think it boiled down to that there were better players at the time, and that's fine.
That's a super, super fair assessment.
Yeah.
And I'm always just curious, right? Because I think knowing that would change how I handled the discussion.
Yeah.
Right. Because I want someone to pursue a thing they're passionate about, right? But say if the thing I fell in love with at 4, because I'm 4, is I want to jump show horses. You know, I have a terrible skeleton for that. Do you know what I mean? Like it may be nice that somebody's like, I don't know that this is the passion you should pursue.
Right. That's funny. I've known you for a bit, but I can't see you jumping horses.
No, of course not. Do you know what I mean? But like, who knows if that's what you fall into love with? Like,
right.
Fuck.
Well, he came to me one night. He was, it's hard to see your kid devastated. And I said something to him out loud that I was like, oh my God, I can't believe I just said that. I wish I could take it back. So he was just like, I don't know how much longer I can do this, Dad. Like, I'm working so hard. Like, I'm not getting played. This is really hard. Like, really, really hard. And I said something to him, and I was like, oh my God, I can't believe I just said that. I was like, listen, man, I get it. I've been seeing you work your ass off for like 4 months. There's only like 3 games left. Listen, if you want to quit, we can quit. But if you want to finish what you started, finish what you started. And as I said that, I was like, oh my God, I can't believe I just gave him the out. I cannot believe I just did that. It just was like something that just, and I was like, oh shit, well now I can't take it back.
Interesting.
So I threw it out there and he's like, I'm going to finish what I started. And I was like, holy shit. Okay. Let's do this.
Yeah. Lean into that and get as loud as possible.
So he did. And I was like, okay, we're going to commit. You're going to go to every practice, every game, regardless how much you play. Let's just finish. Okay. Well, he ended up playing like his last game, and he ended up making the freaking game-winning block for his buddy to run to the end zone, who scored the winning touchdown. He was freaking elated. And we really turned that into a lesson. I was like, dude, had you gave up, like you would have never celebrated that moment. Like that was freaking huge, man. It wasn't until he was 10, 2 years later, actually the day we're recording was the day we released his book 3 years ago. And he came to me and he's like, you know, Dad, you're writing books and stuff like this. So I've got 4 books that are out. 3 books are out. My 4th one on the way. And he's like, I think I want to do something with my story. I was like, what do you want to do? He's like, I think I want to write a kid's book. And I was like, a kid's book about what? He's like, I don't know. He's like, I'm a little older now and I see my friends quitting on stuff. He's like, I just want to share my story about not quitting. And I was like, yeah, man, good idea. So we sat down, we just basically drafted this thing out on a Word document. We sent it to an illustrator. It came back with 1 run. Book's called Never Give Up No Matter What, but it basically takes a kid through working his ass off, right? Not getting played, all the emotions that kid feels, tempted to give up, and then in the end be like, no, I'm going to put my flag in the ground and I'm going to finish what I damn well started, right? He didn't say those words.
Sure.
But he did, and man, the book took off. He did really well. He hit a bestseller on Amazon. I was like, dude, this was a good story. And now he's spoken at 4 events now, and he's got another event in January. We're flying to Baltimore. He's going to be talking to a bunch of people in the health industry with clients and people who want to take better care of their health and people who want to give up. I'm like, dude, you got something here, man. So,
you know, and it's like for people listening, and I'm cynical people or any of that. I think it's really easy to be like, well, of course he writes a book. You know, his dad's got a thing that's already going on, X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
And there's no doubt that that's added horsepower that got to be used to help this thing go. You know, whether or not he's solo on his own, comes up with this and decides, I'd like to write a book. Does it succeed as well? It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
That point is totally irrelevant.
Yeah.
The success of his book isn't the thing that matters. Success on that side of thing, like there's magic involved with some success. But writing a book and accomplishing it and sharing your story, and not only that, what comes along with the confidence that what he did, you created something. You put something out there. You're vulnerable. You risk that insecurity. You know how many people want to write stuff, but then don't because who the fuck am I to write something?
Yeah. Yeah.
Most.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of people.
And then the other side of people that are concerned with what people think of what they put out. I heard something years ago, and I've always, it rang true, is you find me a really negative book review by anyone who's ever written a book. Doesn't happen. Those of us that create don't shit on other people who do it. No. We understand what it takes.
Oh, yeah.
And for those of you who out there who just consume, I'm not worried about your opinion.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's incredible because he wants to speak to winners.
He does. And there's two things that really came out of that, I think, for him personally, because I've never seen him come close to giving up on anything since he wrote that book. I think when you put pen to paper and say, this is what I stand for.
Oh, he has an identity now.
Yeah.
There's a different thing is he doesn't quit.
He doesn't. He's so damn stubborn.
I'm curious to when he runs into a thing, because I've quit a handful of things in my life that needed to be quit.
Yeah.
The bicycle shop. There was a point there where that eject button needed to be hit. A couple times in life where it was time to get out.
Yeah. I would say it's fascinating. I've never had anybody ask me that question, but as I look at his life, his discernment and tolerance with relationships he's got serious boundaries. Oh, great. Like he has I probably should be careful what I say. He's got a former friend who got caught with drugs, and he wants nothing to do with that.
What type of drugs?
Right. Crack cocaine and
this isn't the one he should be
heroin
using. I don't recommend either of these.
No, his buddy got caught with weed and he's only 13. And I'm
it's
like,
a really tricky thing.
I know. And I was like, hey man, so what do you think of so-and-so? He's like, out. I was like, what do you mean? He's like, he's not my friend anymore. I want nothing to do with him. I'm like, wow. Okay. So that's kind of cool that he has his own tolerance and boundaries around things. But I will say this. So he's 128 pounds, 13 years old, and he's right guard on the offensive line. He is the smallest offensive lineman by about 40 pounds to 100 pounds. The kids that he goes up against are anywhere from 40 to 100 pounds more than him. And there are games where I'm like, holy shit.
How do we put more food in him?
Right. But that kid is a stubborn tank of strength. And I barely saw anybody get through him. I'm like, dude, I was like, there was one game he did a couple weeks ago. This kid was all part of 250 pounds. And Mason was pushing this kid around. And I was like, dude, were you scared? He was like, yeah. And I was like, so how did you just keep going? He was like, it was him or me.
That's it.
And I was like, that's it? He's like, yeah, that's it. It was him or me. He's like, and I wasn't going to let him get past my line. And I was like, man, more power to you. Because I think like maybe part of that mission in that book really taught him to be like, I'm going to stand my fucking ground. And you ain't going to, if you're going to get past me, you're going to have to run over me and kill me. Like, I think that like, that's literally how stubborn he is, which I love and hate that about him. So he's tough to negotiate with sometimes. He doesn't relent, man. He just
tough to negotiate.
He is.
A little terrorist.
He is.
So with the Dad Edge and with your groups, how do you guys address physical culture within the group? Yeah. So like, because for me, it's always been something, because it's something I'm in 100% control of. So that it makes everything better.
Oh my God. Yeah. So you're preaching. So I used to be overweight. So
same.
Yeah. Really?
No, man, I was 320.
What?
That was the biggest I got.
Really?
But I was doing strongman at the time. I was 320 and very, very strong, but I looked like a beanbag.
Okay.
At that time, I deadlift over 700 pounds. I'd squatted 1,000 and in gear and done some other things, but
yeah,
it's not a good look.
Right. I was the opposite. I just took terrible care of myself. I was never athletic. And when I was about 18, I found fitness. That's actually what I have my degree in, is exercise science and nutrition. But anyway, that's a long way to say that here's my stance on that. Being physically taking care of yourself, like I'm Monday through Saturday, like every day, 4 a.m. I'm up in the gym by 4:30. And we teach our guys, self-care is 4 things: physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, self-care. Get up and move your body at least 3 times a week, at least, right? Because you're right. When you take care of your body physically, your emotional health will elevate, your mental health will elevate. You're going to be more productive. You're going to feel better. Your relationships will get better. My physical fitness, and the one thing we teach guys is like, listen, you don't need a 6-pack, right? To have like great health and good fitness.
No, it's kind of at the end of the spectrum.
Yeah. But freaking I get a little fired up over this because like, be the freaking health example to your kids, man. Like, have your kids try to keep up with you.
Right.
Right. Don't be the guy sitting on the damn couch and like, yeah, this is what you do after 30. Like, get up, move with them, exercise with them, throw the football with them, play tag with them, wrestle with them. I am a huge proponent of that.
Yeah, I can see that trap, right?
Yeah.
Like that, get into a regular job. And like, I wonder how much that has to do with, what we've seen with testosterone decreases within society, right? Is it because we are locking into this job? We are sitting all day. We're not physically competing at anything anymore after most of us 19.
Yeah.
Right. And so then, whether through college we're competing for jobs or sex or women or whatever it is, as humans, like we're still competing.
Right.
But then once that's done and guys got a marriage, got a kid, got the house, got the thing, everything that were on the goals list has been checked. I see how people put on 100 pounds in from 20 to 30. It's less than a pound a month.
Yeah.
It's less than a pound a month for a decade. You don't even notice it on the scale. I get it. I see how that happens.
It does. Yeah. It's unfortunate, but yeah.
Man, dialing it back in, being one of those things that, again, like I'm in control over. That, for me, and the way that I had to realize it is, I think my message and voice is what is important for me to share. How I package that matters. And then not only that, if I am going to talk about some other things that have been performance enhancers for me, whether that's psychedelics or any of these other type of things, if the rest of my shit's not together, you can discredit it.
Yeah.
And I refuse to let that get in the way of what I really believe is something that could be important for people. Mm-hmm. Not for everyone.
Yeah.
But if it is, I think you should look into it. It changed my life.
Yeah.
Made things much, much better.
Yeah.
So that physical side is just, and again, a 6-pack thing, it's crazy.
It is. And I think a lot of guys, I'm sure you probably run into this, especially when guys get married, career, kids. Well, if I exercise, that's selfish. Like I'm taking, like guys live in 2 camps. And if they're,
look, that's a really easy way to write it off.
It is. You're right. But I think guys live in 2 camps when they're married and have kids. Like I either need to be at work or with family. And if not at work, I'm with family. If I'm not with family, I'm at work. And to do something to take care of myself, that is selfish.
Well, then why aren't you teaching the next generation under you that taking care of yourself is important? Like that's the message, not the just being present. Not
right.
Man, you being in the same room as your kids is not the same as present.
Exactly. Yeah, you could be totally off in la la land.
Most people are.
I mean, listen, I take my boys to school every morning, and I'm up way before they are. I'm up at 4, and I love the fact that my son will text me at 6:15, like, "Hey, good morning, Dad. You still at the gym?" I'm like, "Yep, I'm leaving in about 10 minutes." Like, I'll get a text from my oldest all the time, and I love the fact that they see me come home and they know that I've been at work for 2 hours before they even get up.
Yeah.
Because I think that in and of itself sends a message,
Well, what it does show, and for most of those people out there, because I'm sure your kids at this point realize you're busy.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And like, if you want success by any metric, busy is part of the equation. Like there isn't, win the lottery, good luck with that one, I suppose. Right. And even that one doesn't work out for people who don't know what to do with shit.
Yeah, they go broke.
Yeah, they do terrible. And so busy is going to be part of the equation, whether you've chose this thing that you're in love with or you're going to be successful doing it for someone else.
Yep.
And so, get used to being busy, and showing that this is a priority. And so I'll steal time here.
Yep.
And that's how it works. You prioritize things. And the people I know, they're like, well, but sleep. Like you're losing hours somewhere else. I promise that you have a hole in this bucket that's not collecting time well.
Well, you hit a really good point. I'm a big fan of auditing your time, right?
100%.
When guys tell me, so like I'll give you a perfect example, man. So we have 34 mastermind sessions per week, Monday through Saturday, morning, afternoon, evening. And we'll have guys that join the mastermind and they now have access to 34 mastermind sessions per week that are an hour long. Every now and again, we'll have guys that quit. They're like, hey, man, I just don't have the time. And I'm like, really? And that's fine. If that's their perspective, they can go. But on their way out, I'm like, is it that you don't have the time or you're not making this a priority or you're spending time elsewhere? And they're like, what do you mean? I was like, I want you to open up your phone right now and I want you to open up the screen time and I want you to tell me how much time are you spending on Instagram and Facebook? Tell me the minutes per day right now.
I would immediately try to argue with you and say, well, part of that is the job. That's part of what I do for a living.
Right. Well, for you, yeah.
Yeah.
But like, and, I think that's a real eye opener. Like when you freaking get a screen time report every single Sunday. And when you see
you fit in 6 hours of nothing.
Yeah.
Incredible.
It's like, holy shit. Like I was on freaking social media for 9.5 hours this week. How's that even possible? That can't be right. It's like, yeah, man, it's right. Like that's 9 hours of your life. It's the marbles.
Right.
It's freaking, that's like a marble, right?
So I've recently, I took some trips this summer, and I've kind of had a new click over with discipline, like within the last month. And the shift happened. We were in Dubai with some friends and watching some friends fight. So I've got two friends from the strength world that took into boxing and we're both on a card together. And so one way or another, we managed to get over to go watch the fight in person.
Damn, you do get around. Travel.
Yeah, I went there from Africa.
Wow.
I was on a rafting trip with some friends.
A lot of people here in Missouri, we just go to the Black River.
But
you go to Africa.
I went to the Zambezi. It's slightly different in Victoria Falls. There's crocodiles. We have less of those here.
Right.
And hippos, things like that. But yeah, incredible. So we get over to that fight, and I'm looking at my friends, and the point of this is one of them is Steffi Cohen, who's one of our friends. She's a 25-time powerlifting world record holder, is arguably one of the strongest females to have ever lived on the planet. Pulls over 500 pounds at 118 pounds body weight.
Oh my God.
Incredible. Benches 225, 230.
That's who you want on a trip like that with alligators.
She's a stud. Yeah, she's a stud, right? So she's boxing.
Yeah.
She's moved from powerlifting into boxing and spent the last year switching sports and training and being bad at something. Right? You went from being best in the world to being bad at a thing, and everyone's going to talk shit.
Yep.
She don't care. The other one is Hapthor Bjornsson, who's been, we've been friends with, I guess I met Happy the first time, like 2008, going to Iceland for competitions and things like that. So Hapthor, for those listening, is 2018 world's strongest man, 6'10", 460 pounds, played the Mountain on Game of Thrones. Gigantic human. They just don't make bigger people.
Right.
Has made a move to boxing for this Eddie Hall fight that he and Eddie were going to fight. And Hapthor has put his entire life into it. Like, looks great. He's down to 340 pounds. Or I think, like at the fight in Dubai, he was 317, 318, shredded. A terrifying looking specimen.
I'm sure, person. Yeah.
He looks like the architects from the Aliens franchise when they came out with
I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
Prometheus. Yeah. So he looks like one of those guys in person. It's like he should be fucking studied. They should, when he dies, put him in a fucking thing and just start trying to figure out how we all get that. He just looks like a maxed out video game character. He's the strangest looking gigantic person. But seeing that and realize that's two people that left something they're very confident and comfortable in to pursue this new thing they suck at. And not only suck at, all their background shows this isn't a thing you should ever be good at. And whether they are or not is irrelevant. They've done it and they're committed to it and they got that experience and they got to fight. And then seeing the level of discipline that they had switched something in me. And I realized that like, I'm not as lean as I'd like to be. And I'm curious to what that looks like because I've never really pushed it. I've lost 60 pounds, give or take. I've gotten comfortable. My body looks much better now, healthier than it did when I was competing, but I don't know what that edge is of lean because I've never touched it. And looking at that one, I was like, man, that goal, and I don't have a % body fat goal, but I'll know whenever I'm there that like, oh, I'm at now a thing that's not sustainable.
Right.
And I'll hold that as long as I can and I'll go, cool. The only thing separating me and that goal is hard work and discipline. There isn't a single other outside factor. I have a gym. I have a company I work with that sends me meals. So I just have to eat those. Just don't go out of my way to eat fat shit things.
Right. Right.
And
no
so
KFC.
like the realization of that is the accountability part that I want this. So do it. Right. If we don't want it, don't ever fucking mention it again. If we mention it again, I'll cut out your tongue because it's not important to you. Just keep talking about it like it is in one day and we'll do it and this and that. But like, either do it or shut the fuck up.
Yeah.
And if you're not willing to do the thing on your goal list that only takes hard work and discipline, why would you accomplish any of the ones that are really hard that require a bit of magic?
Yep.
Like if you can't do this one, what are you going to do?
Yep.
And so it's been an interesting switch up.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah.
And so curious to see how it plays out.
I love that statement. Go do something that you're not good at.
Dude.
Like go do something you suck at.
It was a really hard change for me getting out of leaving a sport.
Yeah.
That was a hard identity shift with finishing up the Highland Games, finding a thing that I love and became best in the world at that I'll never do again. Like my knee and hip, I can't throw at all. Like I can't do it enough to show your kid how to do things. This all still throws great.
Right.
And so it's a tough identity to figure out of like, what do I do if I'm not an athlete?
Right.
Man, this has been great, Larry. I love what you're doing. Where can people find more info about Dad Edge, any of that, where they can find the show?
Super easy, man. Just thedadedge.com is my website. The Dad Edge is Instagram. You can find me at Larry Hagner and Facebook. That's how you can connect with me. If podcasts are downloaded literally everywhere, iTunes, Pandora Radio, iHeartRadio, everywhere. Anywhere you get podcasts, you can find it. The other thing, if the Dad Edge Alliance, which is our mastermind, if that's something on your heart, there's a landing page on our website, which is thedadedge.com/alliance. You get all the information there. Yep. You do have to apply. And then you have to meet with somebody on our team. We don't allow just anybody in. We do that for a reason. We've never had a join now button on our landing page, and we never will. We want guys to be three things: humble, hungry, and have some sort of emotional intelligence before you come and do life with us. But we are, 700 strong, imperfect men. We are not the elite. We have hunger to be the elite. So that's where we're at.
Yeah. Hunger to be better, dude. Progress.
Yeah, progress
over everything.
Progress over perfection.
Right. Well, and man, I try to share that with people too, that like, and to me, that ends up being a little bit further the intention versus expectation.
Yeah.
It's really hard to be disappointed by intention.
Yeah. And I'm sure you probably know Ben Newman. Ben Newman he just wrote the book on common leadership. He has a whole chapter on trust the process. Be dedicated to the process. The results will come. A lot of people, they put those results first. If they don't get even an inkling of those results happening, they give up. But if you trust the process, stick to the discipline process, the good things will happen.
Same thing with strength training.
Yeah.
Like it's probably the greatest lesson that I got from lifting that's really translated over that I don't realize I'm getting during the 20 plus years I've trained, right? It has to be done all the time forever.
Yep.
That's the rule.
Yep. Exactly.
There's not we're fit.
Yeah.
And
we're
then we
good
get
now.
to just hit the button.
Yeah. You're done.
No, it's not how it works.
Yeah.
And realizing that's how it applies to any other avenue, whether that's I want to put in the reps with my chick in the relationship and have time for us to communicate and connect. Dude, I love this, Larry.
Me too.
I'm really excited, dude. It's been cool meeting more people like this. I think a younger me would have felt turned off by this kind of elitist, overconfident thing. But that's the advantage of being 38 instead of 30, I suppose.
I mean, we grew up a little bit, right?
Happens.
Yeah.
I'm aware I know more than I did at 30. But I think the difference there too is I'm now aware of how much I don't know. And that keeps getting bigger. That is huge. Expanding at the same pace as the universe. And so I'm just like, well, shit.
Yeah.
I just try to collect as much as I can. That's helpful.
Yeah.
Dude, I love it. I'm really excited. Thank you for coming in.
You bet.
I can't think of, where do you train?
So I go to a couple places. I train here locally at Club Fitness. And then I also train at F45. I just kind of vary up a workout like that every now and again. Yeah.
If you ever, I'd love to lift with you. If
man.
You and your son ever want to come on a weekend, let me know. Send me a text. I'd be happy to train.
Dude, yeah, let's do it.
I love it. I love this environment, and this environment is just ours to play.
My 13-year-old in particular, when he plays football, he would freaking be all over this, man. He loves weight training. So yeah, we'll do it. It'd be awesome.
I'd love to help any way I can, man.
That'd be cool.
So thank you guys for listening. That's the show.